Ever feel like your family has some pretty high expectations for you? Well, today we're going to dive into a story where the stakes were just a little bit higher than normal.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about a Prince of Rice, a rice chest, and a memoir that's kept historians going back and forth for centuries.
It's a story that never gets old. I mean, what makes it so fascinating is that it takes us back to 18th century Korea,
Mm-hmm.
right into the royal court, a world where everything is so intense,
Yeah.
every single decision could be life or death.
Yeah, and at the center of it all, we have Prince Sado, the heir to the Joseon dynasty.
Hmm.
Luckily, we get this really personal look into his life from a memoir written by his wife, Lady Hyeogyun.
Right. That's where things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because, we get all these incredible details about Prince Sado's life and, that tragic death. But it also makes you think, hold on, was this really objective?
Yeah.
Did she maybe shape the story a bit to protect her family or her own place in the court?
See, that's what we're here to figure out. So let's start at the beginning. Prince Sado was born into this life of incredible privilege, but like you were saying, it was also a world of extreme pressure.
Absolutely.
And his father, King Yeongjo, had these huge expectations for his son. So what kind of a ruler was King Yeongjo?
Oh, man. King Yeongjo was a complicated guy, known as a strong and capable ruler. But he was also incredibly demanding, especially when it came to his heir. I mean, he had this vision, you see,
Mm-hmm.
of this dynamic leader, someone who would make the dynasty even stronger.
That doesn't really sound like Prince Sado from what I've read. He was much more into art than politics.
You got it. Painting, calligraphy, music, that was Sato's thing. Of course, to the king, that all seemed pretty frivolous. And to make things even more complicated, Sato had this illness. Nobody knows exactly what it was, but it made him weak. He'd faint a lot.
Ah, so not exactly the picture of health the king wanted for his successor.
Nope, not at all. And King Yeongjo didn't exactly hide his disappointment. He would literally humiliate Sato, berate him in front of the whole court. Can you imagine the impact of all that criticism and judgment?
Especially on the heir to the throne.
Exactly. This wasn't just a father scolding his son. This was a king publicly undermining the future of the whole dynasty.
Feels like a recipe for disaster.
You said it. And that tension between father and son, oh, it just kept escalating as time went on.
It sounds like a very Shakespearean tragedy unfolding.
Right. And it gets even more complicated because at just 9 years old, Prince Saito was married to Lady Hyeogyun, a young noblewoman from a powerful family.
Married at 9.
Yep. Arranged marriage, of course, pretty common back then. But this marriage, oh, it becomes super important to the story.
I can't even picture being married off that young.
Yeah.
But this marriage, it wasn't just about Prince Sado. This was about power, alliances, keeping things stable in the court. Lady Ha-young's family, they were prominent, right?
Oh, yeah, big time. Closely tied to the Noron political party, a very influential group, they actually helped King Yeongjo get to the throne.
Uh-huh.
So this marriage, it basically solidified that alliance, made the king's position even stronger. But for Lady Hyeogyun, it meant being right in the middle of all the drama in court politics.
Okay, so we've got a king who's completely disappointed in his heir, a prince struggling to live up to those expectations, and a wife who's stuck in the middle of this power struggle. Feels like something straight out of a TV show.
You think this is dramatic? Oh, it's about to get a whole lot darker. As Sino got older, he started showing these signs of what we would call mental illness today.
Hallucinations, phobias, right. And those violent outbursts, it's all detailed in Lady Hyeogyun's memoir.
Exactly.
And it's pretty disturbing. I mean, she writes about him setting clothes on fire,
Yeah.
attacking palace staff,
Well-
even bringing her a severed head. That's a very unsettling image of the prince.
Right. But it's super important to remember we're seeing all of this through her eyes. Her account is basically our main source of info about Prince Sereldo. But like we said before, we got to consider the possibility that she might be biased. I mean, could she have exaggerated things? To protect her family, maybe? Or her own position in the court?
Makes you wonder if there was more going on. I mean, could his behavior have been his way of reacting to all that pressure and abuse from his father? Like maybe he was just lashing out, trying to get some control over his life.
Those are great questions to think about. That court was an incredibly restrictive place, especially for someone like Sitato who didn't fit his father's mold at all. That constant criticism, that public humiliation, definitely could have taken its toll on him mentally.
And we can't forget, he also lost his older sister when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
He was really close to her, right?
Oh, yeah, they were incredibly close. She died from measles. It was a crushing blow for him. So we got to factor in all of it. The pressure to be the perfect heir, the constant disappointment from his dad, losing his sister, and that stifling atmosphere of the court. It's a lot for anyone to deal with.
For sure. Sounds like his whole life was building up to some sort of breaking point.
And that's exactly what happened. A whole series of incidents. There were even rumors that Sato was plotting to kill his own father. It all led King Yeongjo to make a very drastic decision.
And that's when he had Prince Sato executed.
Well, not in the traditional sense. Executing his own son would have brought shame to the royal family, so he went with a much more brutal option. He had Sato locked inside a rice chest.
That's what I meant earlier about the rice chest. It's hard to believe something so awful really happened.
Yeah, it was truly brutal and shocking. And what makes it even more chilling is that Lady Hozong saw the whole thing. She describes hearing her husband's cries for 8 days before they finally stopped.
8 days. I can't even imagine how much he must have suffered. And for her to have witnessed that, it's no wonder this story has stayed with people for so long.
Yeah, it's a haunting image, and it raises so many questions. Was Sato really a danger to his father? Or was he just misunderstood? Was this a king protecting his throne? Or was it revenge? And maybe the biggest question of all is, how did this whole experience change Lady Hayoung's perspective? And how much of her story can we really believe?
I can't even begin to imagine what it must have been like to be in Lady Hayoung's shoes, watching your husband die like that, and then having to figure out how to survive in the royal court. That takes serious strength, not to mention some clever maneuvering.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. She's got to protect her kids, protect herself, and deal with the legacy of her husband, all while knowing that one wrong move could destroy her and her whole family.
And remember, her family was right in the thick of it with the Noron political party, so she's not just dealing with personal grief. There's all this political stuff going on, too.
Right. The Norons were the top dogs at the time. They were the ones who helped King Yeongjo get to the throne. They had a ton of power. And Lady Hayoung, as a member of that family, well, she knew the game, you know. She understood what was at stake.
It makes you wonder about her memoir and how much of it is true. If her family was so tight with the king and the Norons, wouldn't it make sense for her to paint Sato as crazy and dangerous?
It's a good question. She would have been under a lot of pressure to stick with the official story, which was that Sato was a threat to the throne because he was out of control, and that King Yeongjo did what he had to do. So yeah, it's possible that she downplayed any political reasons for Sato's death. Maybe she even exaggerated his mental problems to make the king look better.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with only half the pieces. We've got Lady Hayoung's side of the story, which is intense and emotional. But we can't just ignore the fact that she might be biased.
Yeah.
What else do historians look at when they're trying to figure out what happened to Prince Sato?
Well, they look at court records, letters between officials, even stuff written by other people in the royal family. They're trying to find anything that hints at political games or infighting within the court.
So is there anything to suggest that Sato's death was political? I mean, we know he didn't like the Norons. Could they have wanted him out of the picture?
That's one of the theories. Some historians believe the Norons saw Sato as a threat, and that they pushed King Yeongjo to get rid of him.
Wow, that's a pretty big claim. Is there any proof?
Not exactly a smoking gun, but there are some interesting clues. For example, after Sato died, King Yeongjo got rid of a bunch of high-ranking officials, guys who were known to support the prince. Some people see that as him trying to shut down any opposition.
It definitely makes things even more suspicious. So we've got this whole mystery surrounding Sato's death. But the story doesn't end there. It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah, it takes a crazy turn when Sato's son, Jeongjo, becomes king. And guess what he does? He tries to clear his father's name.
This is where we see how history can be rewritten. Jeongjo wasn't just honoring his dad's memory. He was making a political statement.
Exactly. He was challenging the official story, the one pushed by King Yeongjo and the Norons. He was basically saying, hey, my dad wasn't a crazy tyrant. He was a victim of a political conspiracy.
And he didn't mess around. He told everyone that he was Prince Soresto's son. He even gave his parents the highest imperial titles after they were dead.
It was a bold move, and it changed Korean history. Jeongjo didn't just change the story about his dad's death, he also made his own claim to the throne much stronger.
It's crazy how history can be so flexible, how people can change the stories of the past to fit their own goals. In this case, Jeongjo used his power as king to defend his family and tell a completely different version of events.
And it makes you wonder how many other official versions of history are out there, just waiting for someone to challenge them. It reminds us that the past isn't set in stone. It's always being reshaped by those in charge.
It reminds us that we should always question what we're told. Whether it's about history, politics, or even personal stories, we have to ask ourselves, who's telling the story?
Yeah.
What are they trying to achieve? What might be missing?
Totally. And the story of Prince Sato is a perfect example. People have been telling and retelling his story for centuries, each generation adding their own spin.
So as we dig more into Jeongjo's reign and how he impacted Korea, what should we be paying attention to? What were his main goals? And how did he get things done?
Well, one of his top priorities was to strengthen the monarchy and basically make himself more powerful. He saw how all the infighting during his grandfather's time had weakened the throne. He was determined to avoid that.
So what did he do? Did he try to get rid of the Norons completely?
He was smarter than that. He didn't wipe them out. But he did work to balance their power. He promoted people from other factions. He even created new systems and policies, all designed to make the central government stronger and to reduce the influence of those powerful families.
So he was walking a tightrope, trying to keep things stable while also taking control.
Exactly. And he was a reformer, too. He started a lot of progressive changes, like improving education, boosting the economy, and cracking down on corruption.
It sounds like he wanted to create a fairer society.
He did. He believed that for a nation to be strong and successful, it needed a strong and fair ruler. And he saw himself not just as a political leader, but as a moral guide.
That's a big difference from his grandfather, King Yeongjo. He seemed more focused on staying in power.
Definitely. And it shows how the Joseon dynasty was changing. By the time Jeongjo became king, Korea was dealing with a whole new set of problems, both inside the country and outside. And Jeongjo knew that the old ways wouldn't cut it anymore.
Seems like he was pretty ahead of his time.
He was a visionary leader, and his time as king is considered one of the most important periods in Korean history. He set the stage for a more modern Korea, and his impact is still felt today.
It's incredible to think that it all came out of the tragedy of Prince Sato and that rice chest execution.
It is. It shows how one event can have consequences that go way beyond the initial impact.
It's amazing how Jeongjo took this awful family tragedy and actually used it to make positive changes. It makes you wonder if he would have been the same kind of leader without those events, shaping his whole perspective.
That's a really interesting question. It's tough to say for sure, but you can't deny that his father's death had a huge impact on his time as king. It seems like it pushed him to make those reforms and to try to build a fairer society.
It's almost like he was making up for what his grandfather did, not just by clearing his father's name, but by trying to create a better Korea.
Maybe, yeah. There's definitely a sense of redemption in Jeongjo's story. He took something truly terrible and turned it into a chance for progress. And by doing that, he showed just how powerful leadership can be, not just for the present, but for the future, too.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Prince Salido's life and death and, the impact he had on Korea, what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away?
I think it's understanding that history isn't just this fixed, objective account of what happened. It's really more of a dynamic story that keeps evolving. It's shaped by whoever is telling it. And it's up to us to think critically about those narratives, to consider different perspectives, and to question the motives of those in power.
It reminds us that even events from hundreds of years ago can still be relevant to us today. The themes of power, ambition, family loyalty, and the fight for justice, those are all just as important now as they were in 18th century Korea.
Definitely. And by trying to understand the past, we can gain a better understanding of our own present and maybe even work towards a more just and fair future.
Well, there you have it, everyone. A story of royal secrets, family drama, and the power of rewriting history. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Korea's most fascinating historical mysteries.
And if you're interested in uncovering more hidden stories from the past, make sure you subscribe to The Deep Dive for more journeys through history. We'll be back soon with another intriguing tale that'll make you look at the world in a whole new way. Until then, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep learning.